I'm going to now move on, and our fifth speaker tonight is Tom Commins, and Nick Dewey is his evaluator. So Nick, pretty please, when you're ready, please introduce Tom's speech. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, Tom is doing a speech entitled The First World War. It is a 5, 6, and 7-minute speech. It is from Team Collaboration 1 and 2, Evaluation and Feedback 1, and it's just a speech on any topic. So I'm assuming we're going to have some education, entertainment, and inspiration, and other good things from that. Tom hasn't asked me to look out for anything in particular within this one particular speech, but we'll just have to see, how it goes. I know that Tom is a great orator, and I believe his dulcet delivery will provide us with much pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. So Tom, I'll prep you. Tom Commins with the First World War. When you're ready, the stage is yours. Yay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Never again. Never again was what was said after the First World War. A truly global conflict, unprecedented to what we've seen before. Now, not only did the world leaders fail to stop war after this, but this wasn't even the first time a war like this has happened. So this is why my speech is on the First World War. Before the First World War in 1750, there was another truly global conflict that spanned 5 continents and changed the world and created how it is today. Now, I'm going to give you a brief summary of this conflict and just explain why it has such profound consequences on the world and why it's really stuck in my mind, because I'm very new to this. I think with lockdown, everyone's really found very new and creative ways to procrastinate. For me, it's been YouTube. There have been some brilliant rabbit holes that I've got buried in particular the historical side of things. Now, that's a bigger surprise to me than anyone because I dropped history in year 9. So I suppose that really shows you Corona changes you a bit. Okay, so the year is 1750. Europe is a very different place to what it is now, but Europe as a whole is just invading everything it can find. There's a lot of fighting going on. In particular in North America, the French and the British are really having at each other for small land skirmishes. But in Europe, things look very different and are equally violent. Welcome to Europe. The map looks incredibly different. Countries exist here that don't anymore, and the boundaries are very different. However, there's only 5 that you need to know about for here. First, we have Russia, we have Austria, we have France, we have Great Britain, and then we have Prussia. So Prussia is effectively early Germany. It was a very, very violent place at this point. Just before, we'd had the War of the Austrian Succession, in which a woman had tried to, successfully rose to the throne of the Austrian monarchy, and the whole of Europe freaked out and said she rose successfully and proved herself very competent, but there's a lot of fighting involved, in which Prussia stole a little bit of land from Austria, and they wanted it back. Unfortunately for Austria, they were much weaker than Prussia, so they needed allies. And they found this in the form of Russia and France. This, of course, started to scare Prussia, so they needed allies of themselves. So they got that in Great Britain. Now, war was inevitable at this point, it was felt. So to counter, Prussia launched a preemptive strike into Austria. This went horribly. They got pushed back beyond their borders and almost to the capital, Berlin. This was done by Austria and her allies. Now, Britain wasn't much use at this point. They didn't have much of a land army, but what they did have was a good navy, and they could do this to resupply Prussia financially and with weapons. But with this navy, what they could do was really extend the conflict onto other continents, because their main adversary was France. So they opened up a lot more borders across the globe. There was fighting in North America, fighting in India, as well as Africa, turning it into a really completely global conflict. they were using this navy to really try and win the war of attrition. So they'd be able to resupply their troops faster and better than the French, and over time to grind them down. And this took some time, but it worked. In Europe, things weren't looking great for the Prussians. They were horrifically outnumbered. The enemies were at the gate. They needed a miracle. And this miracle came in the form of Russia. The Russian empress died during this war, and her successor was a huge Russian fanboy. So not only did he sue for peace, he gave his entire army over to Prussia, and they could use this to fight off the French and the Austrians. This didn't last long, though, because the Russian new emperor was then killed pretty quickly in a coup organized by his own wife. So things were turning very Game of Thrones. Europe decided it had enough, and peace was made. This peace was what really changed the globe. So France had holdings in North America as well as India, but had to give them up entirely to the British at this point. So this really allowed the British Empire to grow into what it was. North America was able to prosper under just a more stable government, and they were able to extort India for the spices and things they could use to fund what they were doing. As well as this, it really crippled all the countries financially. It was a very expensive war. So this led to, in France, the French Revolution, and then the rise of Napoleon, who then went on to change world history as we saw. In Britain, they were equally broke and had to raise taxes. And this then led to the American Revolution and American independence, and then allowed America to become a superpower as we saw today. This was the platform for them. So this has set the stage for politics in the globe that we see now. But there's one thing in particular why this war is so interesting, and it's how it began. So it began from a strange, tangled web of alliances, initially intended to preserve peace, but then went on just to sucking everyone into this war, this global war, exactly like in World War I. So this has got me really thinking, humans are the same. Generation after generation, if nothing changes, you put in the same inputs, you're gonna get the same outputs. So if we completely ignore what we've done before, history just tends to repeat itself and repeat itself. This is why I urge everyone, not that I'm saying you're gonna start a war, but just humans as a whole need to be more aware of the atrocities that have happened in the past, because then and only then we can stop history repeating itself. And if we take this war that I've just spoken about as the true First World War, then together we can stop World War number 4. Thank you very much.